Our next speaker is Carol Ayala. Carol, we're going to have a change of plans and move Miss Melissa Beckett to now. Melissa is a former commodities trader, and I didn't know that about you, but I'm glad to know that. And a wife and mother of 3 boys, 16, 12, and 1. The oldest 2 boys attend middle school and high school in Northeast Independent School District, my same school district. And Melissa is working to compel the Northeast Independent School District to halt their teaching of draw the line, respect the line, much of the content that Paula was just speaking about, and stop it at all Northeast Independent School District middle schools. And she has detailed and very detailed analysis of the curriculum, and I think you'll really appreciate and be shocked at what's being taught to our middle schoolers. Please welcome Melissa Beckett.
Okay, my stuff is actually not in your briefing book, but we do have handouts and they will be passing them around. They're pretty extensive for a reason. They look like this. So just make sure you go home with one. My name is Melissa Beckett, and thank you very much for taking your time to be here today for this incredibly important topic. If anyone tells you this is not important, they're wrong. I moved to Texas. Make sure I know this right. Okay. I moved to Texas for the second time 4 years ago. We lived in Houston when we first got married. Before we had children, we had our children when we lived in Houston. And I was fortunate enough to learn at that time that Texas actually has a law requiring public schools to teach abstinence in health education classes. I paid attention, I remembered. And so when we were looking, where should we live? My husband worked out of his house out of our house at the time. We picked Texas. One of the top 3 reasons was because of this law. So it infuriates me that public schools and the people infiltrating our shacks are getting away with violating a current law on our books. And no one is doing anything to change that except the people in this room. So you are here for a reason. You can make a difference. It really does matter. So I want to talk to you about 3 things today. I'm going to talk about draw the line, respect the line. And it's awesome I came after Paula, because I would have loved to have an hour with you today. My normal presentation is an hour. And I'm so glad I didn't have to read what you had to read today, Paula. And I apologize to you that our school districts have put you in that position to have to speak those words in the presence of anybody, ever.
But the kids are hearing them every day.
Exactly. And that is an awful, awful crime. I'm also going to talk to you about how our shack is not working and how my grievance process failed, not because of lack of effort. So I'm going to quickly go through the 5 things that Debbie talked about that are in our law, and they're not optional. It's not 1 out of 5, it's not 2 out of 5, it is all of them. The first one says that we must teach abstinence as the preferred choice of behavior. That does not happen in Draw the Line, Respect the Line, and you'll see that in my packet. The second, the curriculum must devote more attention to abstinence. That does not happen in Draw the Line, Respect the Line. Number 3, abstinence is the only method 100% effective protecting from pregnancy, STD, HIV and AIDS, and the emotional trauma associated with sex. That barely happened. It's mentioned one time at the very, very end of the 3-year program, and it's very easy to not get mentioned. One time. I wouldn't count that, but I'll give it a question mark. Sorry. The 4th one, abstinence from sexual activity before marriage is the standard to be taught, not taught at all. The 5th one, which is not mandatory, just like teaching sex education is not mandatory in our public schools, but if you do, you must follow these requirements. The 5th one, if you teach it, and if you choose as a community to offer anything related to contraception, condoms, birth control, so forth, you must use human use reality rates, not theoretical laboratory rates. Another no. Theoretical laboratory rates in all categories. So, I don't know, that's not okay with me, and it shouldn't be okay with anyone here. Because if it is, you're saying that it's okay for our school districts to violate the law, period. It isn't about personal opinion. It isn't about what I think should be taught or what you think should be taught. This is the law, period. And it is not being followed. Oh, whoops, I'm gonna miss that one. Okay, sorry, I'm going backwards in my sheet here. Okay, so this shouldn't be a surprise to any of us though, if you know where this actually came from. This actually was published by Planned Parenthood of California, which they now call ETR Publishing. It was not written in Texas for Texas. So you shouldn't be shocked that it doesn't conform to our laws. It should not be taught here. Okay, so let me tell you real quickly about how Draw the Line works. Paula covered, awesome job, Paula, so I don't have to do that. The focus of Draw the Line is basically that. You tell these children, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade children, my 12-year-old is in 7th grade, okay? Make sure you understand, we're not talking about 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds, 20-year-olds. The focus of Draw the Line is where do you want to draw the line? So Jen, if you want to draw the line at touching people on the outside of the clothes, that's okay. Paula, if you want to go under the clothes at 12 years old, perfectly fine. Nothing wrong with that. If you want to choose that, that's fine. Patrick, if you want to have sex with 100 people if you want to, it doesn't matter. Your wife would care, but the school doesn't care. If you want to choose abstinence and you're not ready for sex, and they don't even use the word abstinence, they say not have sex. That's okay. You can choose that. But when you get into 8th grade, the beginning of the book, it says, now that you're in 8th grade, now where do you want to draw your line? Implying I'm a whole year older. I'm a whopping 13 years old. So I should move my line. From what? From the outside of the clothes to the inside of the clothes to taking my pants off? Doesn't matter. And all those things are talked about in our children's classrooms. You should be mortified. You should leave here angry and go straight to your representative's office and demand they fix this. It's awful. It's wrong. So students that choose that they want to be abstinent and are attending this program, they're not provided the skills or the tools to do so, period. If your school district says they are, tell them, show me. Show me in the book, because they can't do it. It doesn't exist. But they will tell you every day, all day long, on national news, yeah, sure, of course we teach abstinence. Of course we teach it. Show me, show me, show me. They cannot do it. They're definitely not made to feel good about their choice. Students who choose abstinence are at risk of being bullied, shamed, and pressured into having sex. And honestly, that should be no surprise after what Paula just told you. Okay, so what's not in the program? Would it surprise you to know that human reproductive cycle, like how a man and woman come together and make possibly a baby, isn't covered? That's not part of sex education. It's not. It's nowhere. And I have read the entire 3-year program probably 100 times, including the student workbooks, the teacher's manuals. At one point, I could just read it with my eyes closed. It's nowhere. I'm not doing word searches. I've actually read the material. It's also not being taught in our middle school science classrooms because my administrators told me when I met with them, well, we don't need to talk about it then. It's extensively covered in 7th and 8th grade science. Well, don't tell me something because I will go check it out. I met with the head science teacher at the school after I asked my 8th grader, who's very honest, very smart, have you ever been taught anything about sex in 7th and 8th grade science, like actual human reproduction? No, Mom, the most we ever talk about, and this was confirmed by the teacher, is cell reproduction, like an actual cell, sexual, asexual reproduction. And he said, it will never be taught in our classrooms until it is in the TEKS. So Ken, let's get it in the TEKS. And you can't blame him for that. That is not on him. Okay, now, Paula covered how awful this material is. It is 50 Shades of Grey for my 12-year-old. 50 Shades of Grey for your 12-year-old. Your grandchildren and your children. And in my packet, there are the stories and the content is actually in my packet. I will never say anything to you that I have not researched and I cannot show you. It is in your packet. So don't leave here thinking, oh, Melissa's making all this up. Melissa's just overreacting. Read the material and go home and read it to your mom. And see if you feel good about saying it out loud before you decide that it's not in there. And if your school district or anyone else promoting this material tells you that, oh, we've taken that stuff out, because our school district did replace a lot of chapter 8 in the 8th grade book. But I'm analyzing what's in the material, not what was taken out. If I would talk to you about what's taken out, it would be even worse. Again, show me. Show me. Attend the classes. Show me. One thing is not covered, the more sexual partners you have, the more risk you incur. Never once. Not one time. Okay, now, again, surely this curriculum was adopted because it was effective, right? I've told you that it violates the law. I told you how awful it is. So it must be effective, right? No. Even the publisher states there are no significant differences for girls. What's the point of sex education? Decreasing teen pregnancy. Who gets pregnant? Girls. It doesn't work, period. Why on earth would we ever use it? And then, in my school district, I can't speak for yours, but I'm pretty sure it's the same, because this is not just happening in San Antonio. It's happening all over our state. Federal funding is being used to pay for these courses, which is one loophole that needs to be fixed in the law. Obama's TPP program allowed them basically to teach whatever they want, and they get funding for it. If you actually try to get funding in the state of Texas for the program, you will be denied because it doesn't meet Texas law. So I told you we'd talk a little bit about the shack and how the shack is not functioning properly. And remember, Debbie said that the intention of the shack is to ensure that local community values are reflected. That is the number one thing under 28.004, not the last thing. It is the entire reason the shack is intended to be in place. That means parents have to be on the committees. Community members within the school district boundaries should be on the committees. That is not the way it is operating. So in my school district specifically, members are hand-selected by Northeast ISD administration, not the board members. Conservative-minded parents are denied, and community members that are conservative-minded are denied from being on the shack. The application process to be on the shack does not exist. The Board of Trustees only approves the list of shack members months after the members have already been selected and are already serving. It is a rubber stamp after the fact, and I have viewed all the board meetings for the last 7 years, and I can prove it to you every single time. Never before they're put in place. Certain community members can be found on more than one area shack. That is how they're infiltrating our shacks. Shack meetings are now closed in my district to the public. We're not allowed to show up. We're not even allowed to know when, where, or why the meetings are taking place, and members are not allowed to say. And according to the Public Meetings Act, since the board rubber stamps their decisions, the Open Meetings Act should apply to the shack, and that should be without question.
It doesn't right now.
It doesn't say that, but I'm working on that. Okay, so selection of the curriculum was also a problem. They only reviewed 4 curriculums. Surprise, surprise, they were all written by Planned Parenthood of California, ETR Publishing, all 4 of them. They were all presented by one presenter. Not one of those curriculums meet this law that we're talking about. The details of the curriculum were not viewed prior to the vote, only lesson summaries. So let me show you why that's wrong. Why is that important? So let's say I'm a history teacher, because sex is hard to talk about. We've been talking about it for a long time. Let's talk about history. Let's say that we're in 7th grade history, and we're going to talk about the Civil War. I know that's not what we teach here, but let's pretend. Civil War. So as a parent, you're going to expect your child's going to be educated on aspects of the Civil War, right? Okay. Then you get to the lesson summary of the book. And the lesson summary says, we're going to talk about the details of how the Civil War came about, how it was fought, and how it was won. That sounds great, right? That sounds like you're going to cover what you intend to cover. Again, this is lesson summaries. But when we actually get to the content, guess what we're going to do? We're not going to do any of that. We're going to play a game. And the game is going to help you learn the names of the presidents, starting with George Washington through Donald Trump. Are you happy with that? Does that teach the Civil War? That's what's happening in our textbooks. That's why evaluation of a curriculum based on a lesson summary doesn't cut it. And when I asked my school district, why are we teaching this? It violates the law. And I met with the superintendent, and he brought his staff. Well, of course, Melissa, we would never do that. But I'm showing you proof that this is what's happening. Well, we would never do that. We'll look into it, but we would never do that. And then they did an analysis as part of my grievance process. And that analysis was all from the lesson summaries. Of course, we're talking about abstinence. It says we are in the lesson summaries. They couldn't pick any item in the actual curriculum to prove that they were not violating the law. So pay attention. Don't let them get away with that. This is too important. Okay, so sorry, I moved past all my stuff here. In selection, the curriculum's ineffectiveness was ignored. I told you the publisher says it doesn't work yet. We don't care. Positive results of the old curriculum were also ignored. I can prove to you with data from Northeast ISD that pregnancies at our middle schools were decreasing significantly over the 8 years that Choosing the Best, which is in compliance, was in place, down to only 2 8th grade pregnancies before they got rid of it. Because gosh, we should be able to do better with a program that actually doesn't work. SHAC members were previously told that we had a terrible 6th grade pregnancy problem prior to this vote. We did not. And I can show you data that proves it. The difference between the old and the new curriculum was grossly misrepresented to the SHAC and the Board of Trustees, and parent notifications continue to be way too vague, not including the correct information. So let me tell you about how my grievance process didn't work. I had an amazing lawyer, that wasn't the problem. I had done all the research and I could show you facts to back up all of these statements. That was not the problem. I met with the superintendent and his staff. We filed all 4 levels of grievances in our school district, including meeting with the Board of Trustees. The content of the curriculum was flat out ignored and not viewed. The appeal, which we did do to the Texas Education Association, which I had high hopes for, was dismissed without actually looking at the curriculum. And when I asked, they said it was unnecessary. The district basically said they answered all your questions. So my next step is we will be doing an opinion letter to the Attorney General and asking for him to render an opinion on whether or not the curriculum is in compliance with the law. The problem with that, although I'm hopeful for that as well, is it's not the only curriculum that's a problem. And there are tons of curriculums that are way worse than this one. This is the PG version of our problem. And so you can't just sit back and go, oh, someone else is taking care of it. So in conclusion, and Patrick, I'm finally done. In conclusion, the compliance for 28.004 is not optional, and it should be enforced, and it should not take a parent like me doing all the work that I am doing to figure out how to get it enforced. But I'm happy to do it. The grievance section needs to be amended because I ignored the grievance section, which did not effectively say I could file a grievance if they violated the law. There should be consequences for non-compliance. Districts should not be able to acquire federal funds to pay for a program that violates Texas law. SHAC membership should actually be selected by individual board members so it is a proper representation of our community, and people should not be allowed on more than one SHAC. The human reproduction cycle, including the miracle of life, should be added to middle school TEKS to make sure at least our children are learning basic biology. And holding districts accountable to the law is not an option, and I hope every one of you will leave here today understanding the urgency of doing so. Show me, show me, show me. Do not let them get away with their words. Join me with the AG letter if you have interest, if you have a representative or an organization that can help us sign that. I think that would be incredible. And in my packet, you'll have my access to my full presentation, which is on Facebook. You can go view everything. You have your packet. And my hope is that please don't leave here today and think someone else is going to take care of this. It takes us all to do this.
Great job, Melissa. If you didn't see, these are the books called Draw the Line, Respect the Line. that she was referring to. These books can be reviewed up here, but please do not take them. And as she said, the ETR is a publisher and was started by Planned Parenthood itself. And now you can see, based on the last two speakers, why my wife and I felt like we've been betrayed by our own independent school district. We have an opportunity in Northeast Independent School District. Our superintendent just announced on Monday night after that he was retiring. So it gives an opportunity to everybody in Northeast Independent School District to move, to make sure that we give them a superintendent that cares about protecting Texas children.